What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack turns out to be the most powerful creature to ever walk beneath the moon? For Sarah Ashwood, life in the Red Moon pack meant keeping her head down, her voice quiet, and her hopes buried deep. As an Omega, the lowest rank in the rigid hierarchy that governed werewolf society, she'd learned early that survival meant invisibility. While Alphas commanded with authority and Betas maintained order, Omegas existed to serve, to submit, to fade into the background of pack life like shadows at noon. But when the Alpha's son rejected her as his fated mate in front of the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony, everything changed. The bond that should have united them for life was severed with a single declaration, the mystical thread between their souls snapping like a wire pulled too tight. The pain brought her to her knees on the ceremonial grounds, her screams echoing across the gathered wolves as the mark that had begun to form on her throat burned away like acid on skin. And what happens next? No one was prepared for. Not the pack that cast her out into a lethal winter storm. Not the parents who refused to defend her. And certainly not the ancient guardians who had been watching, waiting, counting down the centuries until the prophecy could finally be fulfilled. The morning of the ceremony, Sarah had woken with her heart pounding against her ribs. The scent of lavender and morning dew clung to her skin. Her natural signature, soft and unassuming, the kind of scent that whispered rather than announced. She'd bathed in the cold water of the communal washhouse, scrubbing her skin until it was pink and raw, trying to make herself worthy of what was to come. The Harvest Moon ceremony happened once a year, when wolves who had reached maturity presented themselves before the pack. It was the night when fated mates would recognize each other, when the moon goddess herself was said to pull back the veil and let destiny shine through. For weeks, Sarah had felt the pull growing stronger, a magnetic tug toward Damon Blackthorn, the Alpha's eldest son and heir to the pack. She'd told no one. How could she? An Omega mated to an Alpha was unheard of, a disruption to the natural order that had governed their kind for millennia. But the bond didn't care about hierarchy. It simply was. And every time Damon passed her in the pack house, every time his scent of forest and embers and ozone and steel drifted past her, the bond hummed like a plucked string. The ceremony took place in the great clearing at the heart of Red Moon territory, ringed by ancient oaks whose branches seemed to touch the sky. Hundreds of wolves gathered, their forms ranging from sleek and powerful to small and slight. The pack's hierarchy was visible in how they arranged themselves, Alphas and their families on raised ground, Betas filling the middle ranks, and Omegas clustered at the edges like an afterthought. Sarah stood with the other unmated wolves, her simple dress a stark contrast to the finery worn by females of higher rank. Her hands trembled as Alpha Blackthorn called the ceremony to order, his voice rolling across the clearing with the weight of absolute authority. One by one, wolves stepped forward. Some found their mates immediately, the recognition flashing between them like lightning. The Alpha would acknowledge the bond, and the newly mated pair would mark each other, a bite that left a glowing symbol on the throat, visible proof of their union. The pack would celebrate, and the ceremony would continue. When Damon stepped into the center of the clearing, time seemed to slow. He was magnificent, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair catching the moonlight, his eyes the deep amber of Alpha dominance. The scent of forest and embers rolled off him in waves, and Sarah felt the bond flare to life like a flame touched to oil. Their eyes met across the distance. She saw the recognition hit him, saw his pupils dilate, his nostrils flare as he caught her scent. The bond stretched between them, golden and shimmering, visible to anyone with the sight, to see mystical threads. For one heartbeat, hope bloomed in her chest like a flower in spring. Then his expression changed. Shock became disgust. His lip curled, and the scent of his emotions shifted. Ozone crackling with anger, steel hardening with resolve. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the expectant silence. "I reject this bond." The pack gasped as one. Sarah's vision swam. This couldn't be happening. Rejection was rare, nearly unheard of. The pain of denying a fated mate was said to be agonizing for both parties. But Damon's face was set like stone as he strode toward her. "I, Damon Blackthorn, future alpha of the Red Moon Pack, reject you, Sarah Ashwood, as my fated mate. I sever this bond by the laws of our kind, and by my own will." The formal words hung in the air for a moment. Then the bond shattered. Sarah screamed. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever imagined. Fire and ice and acid and knives all at once, concentrated in her chest where the bond had taken root. She collapsed to her knees, her body convulsing as the mystical connection tore apart. Around her, wolves recoiled, some looking away in disgust, others watching with morbid fascination. Through the haze of agony, she heard Damon's voice, cold and final. "I will not bind myself to an Omega. My mate will be strong, worthy of standing beside an Alpha. You are neither." Someone else stepped forward. Lissa Thorne, a beta female whose scent of cinnamon and iron had always made Sarah's wolf uneasy. She moved to Damon's side, her hand sliding possessively onto his arm. "Choose strength," she whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Choose power." And Damon chose. The Alpha himself emerged from the crowd, his face an unreadable mask. "The rejection is witnessed and acknowledged," he announced. "Remove her from the ceremony grounds. The ritual continues." Guards seized Sarah's arms, rough hands that showed no mercies as they dragged her away from the clearing. She couldn't stand, couldn't walk. The pain was still roaring through her system, the severed bond weeping like an open wound. She caught a glimpse of her parents in the crowd. Her mother looked away. Her father's face was carefully blank. No one helped her. No one spoke in her defense. They took her to the edge of pack territory, where the cultivated lands gave way to wild forest. It was late autumn, the cusp of winter, and the first real storm of the season was gathering on the horizon. Dark clouds roiled overhead, and the scent of snow hung heavy in the air. "You're exiled," the head guard said, his voice flat. "By order of the Alpha. Cross back into Red Moon territory, and you'll be killed on sight." They dumped her at the boundary marker, a weathered stone carved with the pack symbol, and left without a backward glance. Sarah lay where she fell, her body still racked with pain, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Exiled, the word echoed in her thoughts. Cast out during the first winter storm, with no supplies, no shelter, no protection. It was a death sentence dressed up as mercy. She tried to shift into her wolf form, but the pain made it impossible. Every time she reached for her inner wolf, she found only an echo, a hollow space where her other half should be. The bond severance had wounded more than just her heart. The first snowflakes began to fall as darkness settled over the forest. Sarah forced herself to her feet. She couldn't stay here. If she didn't find shelter, she would freeze before morning. She stumbled forward, each step agony, following a deer trail deeper into the wilderness that marked the boundary between pack lands and the truly wild places, where rogues and worse were said to roam. The storm hit with brutal force. Within an hour, the snow was falling so thick she could barely see 3 feet ahead. The temperature plummeted. Her thin ceremonial dress offered no protection against the wind that cut through the trees like a knife. She wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth chattering so hard she thought they might crack. Time became meaningless. She walked because stopping meant death. She pushed through snowdrifts that reached her thighs. Her feet went numb first, then her hands. The pain from the bond severance had faded to a dull, constant ache. But now, a new kind of suffering took its place. The slow, creeping cold that promised to drag her down into darkness. When she saw the barn, she almost thought it was a hallucination. But no, there, ahead, was a structure. Old and half-collapsed, but it had walls and a roof of sorts. Shelter. She used the last of her strength to pull open the door and stumble inside. The barn smelled of hay and rot and animal musk, but it was out of the wind. She collapsed into a pile of ancient straw in one corner, her body curling instinctively into a ball to preserve what little heat remained. This is it, she thought with strange clarity. This is where I die. She thought about her life, 21 years of trying to be good enough, small enough, invisible enough. She thought about the bond that had promised everything and delivered only pain. She thought about Damon's disgusted face, her parents' turned backs, the pack that had discarded her like garbage. Maybe it was better this way. The cold sank deeper. Her breathing slowed. The darkness at the edges of her vision expanded until there was nothing left but a tiny pinpoint of awareness. And then, not even that. Sarah Ashwood closed her eyes for what she believed would be the last time. But something else opened them. Warmth. That was the first thing she became aware of. Warmth surrounding her, pressing against her frozen skin from all sides. She stirred, confusion cutting through the fog in her mind. Dead people didn't feel warm. Dead people didn't feel anything. Her eyes fluttered open, and she found herself surrounded by wolves. Her breath caught in her throat. They were massive, far larger than any pack wolf she'd ever seen. Their forms pressed close on all sides, a living wall of fur and muscle. She was in the center of them, their body heat creating a cocoon that had drawn her back from the brink of death. Sarah's mind struggled to count them through her still foggy awareness. 1, pressed against her back, its fur thick as a winter coat. 2, at her feet, its massive head resting near her knees. 3, 4, 5. She counted around the circle, her heart beginning to pound. 10. There were 10 of them. They weren't attacking. They were protecting her. They had formed a circle around her unconscious form, using their own bodies to keep her alive through the killing storm. Outside the barn, she could hear the wind still howling. But here, in this shelter, surrounded by these impossibly large wolves, she was warm. She was alive. One of the wolves stirred, the largest one, positioned at what might be called the head of their formation. Its fur was midnight black with silver threading through it like starlight, and its eyes glowed with an intelligence that was distinctly not animal. The wolf rose to its feet. Even on 4 legs, its shoulder was level with her head where she sat. It moved with deliberate grace, stepping carefully through the circle of its companions until it stood before her. Then, impossibly, it began to shift. Sarah had seen transformations her entire life. They were quick, violent affairs, bones snapping, skin tearing, the human form compressing into something bestial in a matter of seconds. But this was different. This was fluid, almost beautiful, like watching water change from ice to liquid. The wolf's form seemed to flow upward and inward, darkness and shadow coalescing until a man stood where the creature had been. He was tall, his body marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, and those glowing eyes remained unchanged, amber threaded with something that looked like moonlight itself. His age was difficult to determine. His face had the lines of experience, but his body was that of a warrior in his prime. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and his scent, God's, his scent. Aged oak and winter snow and pine and storm, layered together in a combination that made her wolf, silent since the rejection, suddenly stir with interest. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Good. We weren't certain we'd reached you in time." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She managed only a croak. The man, Alpha, her instincts screamed. This was an alpha like she'd never encountered, gestured to one of the other wolves. It shifted as smoothly as he had, revealing a younger male with copper hair and kind eyes. He produced a flask from somewhere and offered it to her. "Water," the younger man said gently. "Drink slowly." She did, the liquid soothing her raw throat. When she could finally speak, her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The dark-haired Alpha smiled, and it transformed his stern face into something almost warm. "My name is Kieran Stormblade. These are my brothers, the Shadow Guard, and we, Little Omega, have been waiting for you for a very, very long time." "I don't understand," Sarah said, her mind still struggling to process everything. "Why would you be waiting for me? I'm nothing. Nobody." Kieran crouched before her, bringing his face level with hers. His eyes searched her features with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. "You're wrong," he said softly. "Do you know what happened when your fated mate rejected you tonight?" "Pain," she whispered. "He broke the bond." "He broke more than that." Kieran reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her throat where Damon's mark should have formed. The contact sent a jolt through her system, not the painful pull of a fated bond, but something else. Something deeper. He shattered a binding that has held you prisoner since infancy. Sarah stared at him. "What binding?" "The one your parents placed on you when you were 3 days old." Kieran's voice was gentle but implacable, delivering truths like careful cuts. "The one that suppressed your true nature, that forced your wolf into silence, that made you appear weak when you are anything but." "That's impossible," she breathed. But even as she said it, she felt something stirring inside her. That hollow space where her wolf should be wasn't empty after all. Something was there, awakening like a giant rousing from centuries of sleep. Kieran stood and began to pace, his movements predatory and precise. "There is a prophecy," he said. "Very old, nearly forgotten. Relegated to children's stories and ancient texts that few bother to read anymore. But my brothers and I, we have lived long enough to know that all prophecies contain truth, if you can decode their meaning." One of the other wolves shifted, a woman with silver hair and sharp features. "Shall I recite it, Commander?" Her scent was crisp snow and steel, and the way she looked at Kieran spoke of absolute loyalty. "Please, Mira." The silver-haired woman closed her eyes, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality as she spoke. "When pack turns on pack and brother bars the gate, when winter's teeth bite deep and seal the fated mate, when one cast out finds death beneath the storm's cruel hand, the silver matriarch will rise to heal the broken land. She will be small among the mighty, silent among the strong, bound by blood and broken by betrayal. Waiting all along. She will come when hope is ashes, when the old ways fail and fall, and her howl will wake the sleeping. Her call will gather all." Sarah's breath came in short gasps. "The silver matriarch," she repeated. That's just a story. A myth. All myths begin somewhere. Another of the guards spoke, a massive man with battle scars crossing his dark skin. "My name is Thorn. I was there when the last matriarch fell, 3,000 years ago. I watched her die trying to unite the packs against a darkness that nearly consumed us all." 3,000 years? Sarah's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. "That's impossible. Wolves don't live that long." "Normal wolves don't," Kieran agreed. "But we are not normal wolves. We are the Unchained, guardians bound by prophecy to serve the matriarchs. When the last one fell, we entered a kind of hibernation, waiting for the signs that would herald the next one's birth." He looked at her with such intensity that she had to fight not to look away. 21 years ago, we felt it. A pulse of power so strong it woke us from our long sleep, and we began to search. "Your parents felt it too," Mira added, her voice hardening. "They knew what you were, what you would become, and they were afraid." Afraid? The word came out broken. Her parents had never been warm, but she'd believed they at least cared for her in their way. "The matriarch is power beyond measure," Kieran explained. "She is a queen in truth, capable of commanding any wolf regardless of rank. Your parents were mid-ranking betas in a pack that valued strength and domination. They feared you would be taken from them, or worse, that you would threaten the pack's hierarchy. So they found a witch, an old one, powerful enough to bind your true nature." Sarah's hands clenched in the straw beneath her. "If this is true, why didn't the binding hold? Why would rejection break it?" "Because the binding was tied to your first fated mate bond," Mira said. "The witch told your parents that when you found your mate, he would balance you, would help you control your power. They thought a fated bond would keep you manageable." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They didn't account for rejection. The magical backlash of severing a fated bond is immense, more than enough to shatter a binding that had already been weakening for years." Sarah felt her wolf stir again, stronger this time. It was like a presence in her mind that had always been there, but muted, hidden behind a wall of cotton and fog. Now that wall was cracking, and what lay beyond it was vast. "I feel it," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. "I feel her. My wolf. She's so much bigger than I thought." "How is she so big?" "Because you are the matriarch," Kieran said simply. "Your wolf is not meant to be small. Nothing about you is meant to be small. You have been living as a shadow of yourself your entire life, and now," he smiled, "now you get to be real." The wolf in her mind pushed harder against the weakening barriers. Sarah gasped as power flooded through her veins like liquid fire. It didn't hurt, but it was overwhelming. Sensation upon sensation, piling up until she thought she might drown in it. "Breathe," Kieran commanded, suddenly beside her, his hands on her shoulders grounding her. "The first emergence is always the most intense. Your body is remembering what it was meant to be. Just breathe." Sarah focused on his voice, on the solid warmth of his hands, on the scent of oak and snow and storm. The power continued to build, but she found a rhythm to it, a pattern. It rose and fell like waves against a shore, and she learned to ride it rather than fight it. "Good," Kieran murmured. "Very good. Now, I need you to listen carefully. In a few moments, your wolf is going to demand release. She's been caged for 21 years, and she wants out. When that happens, don't fight her. Let her come forward. Let her show you what you truly are." "What if I hurt someone?" Sarah asked, fear cutting through the power haze. "You won't." His certainty was absolute. "The matriarch's first gift is empathy. You feel the emotions of those around you, and your wolf will never harm those she considers hers. And you are already ours, Sarah. From the moment we felt your birth, you became ours to protect. Now it's time for you to protect us in return." The barriers in her mind finally shattered completely. Sarah threw her head back and screamed as her wolf surged forward with the force of a tsunami. The transformation that followed was unlike anything she'd ever experienced or witnessed. Where normal shifts were fast and painful, hers was slow and incredible. She felt her bones flowing like water, reshaping themselves not through breaking, but through controlled transformation. Her skin rippled as fur emerged, not the brown or gray of common wolves, but silver that seemed to glow from within. Each strand catching light that didn't exist in the dark barn. Her senses exploded outward. She could smell everything. The scent signatures of each of the 10 guards surrounding her, the lingering traces of animals that had sheltered here seasons ago, the very texture of the storm still raging outside. She could hear Kieran's heartbeat, steady and strong. She could feel the earth beneath her, thrumming with a pulse she'd never noticed before. And she was growing. Her form expanded past the size of a normal wolf, then past the size of an alpha. Muscle packed onto her frame in layers, power thrumming through every fiber of her being. When the transformation finally completed, she stood on 4 legs in the center of the barn, and her shoulder was level with Kieran's head. And he wasn't a small man. "By the moon," one of the guards breathed. Sarah looked down at herself. Silver fur covered her body, glowing faintly in the darkness. Her paws were massive, each one large enough to crush a skull. She opened her mouth and felt fangs that could tear through anything. This was her true form. This was what she was meant to be. Kieran stepped forward, no fear in his scent, only awe and something that might have been pride. "There you are," he said softly. "The silver matriarch. Do you see now? Do you understand what they stole from you?" Sarah's wolf rumbled, a sound that shook dust from the barn rafters. And then, for the first time, she heard her wolf's voice in her mind. Not the faint whisper she'd grown accustomed to, but a clear, powerful presence. "We are whole," the voice said, feminine and ancient and utterly certain. "We are as we were meant to be. And we will never be caged again." Sarah let out a howl that shook the very foundations of the barn. It was a sound of rage and triumph and rebirth, a declaration to the world that something new, something old, had awakened. The Shadow Guard joined her, their voices rising in a chorus that cut through the storm. And somewhere far away, in the Red Moon Pack, wolves stopped what they were doing and lifted their heads in primal response to a call they didn't understand but couldn't ignore. When Sarah finally shifted back to human form, the transition was smooth and natural. She stood naked in the straw, but one of the female guards was already there with a cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders with gentle efficiency. "How do you feel?" Kieran asked. "Strong," Sarah said. And her voice was different now. It carried an undertone of power that had nothing to do with volume. "I feel like I could tear down mountains, like I could command the very moon itself." She looked at her hands, turning them over, as if seeing them for the first time. "Is this what it's always supposed to feel like? For you?" "Yes." Kieran's smile was warm. "For the rest of us? Not quite. You are unique, Sarah, the first of your kind in 3 millennia. And now," he gestured to the other guards, "now we help you learn to control it." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of training and discovery. The Shadow Guard had a settlement deep in the wildlands, a place built into the side of a mountain, hidden by ancient wards and geographical isolation. It was beautiful and strange, constructed in a style that spoke of ages long past. Each of the 10 guards took turns teaching her different aspects of her power. Kieran taught her control, how to shift at will, how to maintain her form, how to draw on her power without being consumed by it. Mira taught her combat, sparring with her in both human and wolf form until Sarah could anticipate attacks and respond with devastating precision. Thorn taught her about pack dynamics, about the complex web of dominance and submission that governed wolf society. But the most surprising lessons came from her empathic abilities. Sarah discovered she could feel the emotions of those around her as clearly as she could smell their scents. With concentration, she could even influence those emotions, calm rage, boost confidence, instill fear. And in her wolf form, she could command other wolves with nothing more than a thought. "It's the matriarch's gift," explained Lyra, one of the younger guards, whose scent of sage and morning rain marked her as a healer. "You were meant to unite the packs, to bring harmony where there was only conflict. Your power ensures that wolves will follow you not out of fear, but because they want to. Because you make them better." Sarah practiced on the guards, learning to project calm or encouragement. She could feel their emotions in return, their fierce loyalty, their protective instincts, their genuine affection for her. They had waited 3,000 years for her arrival, and now that she was here, they treated her with a combination of reverence and familial warmth that made her chest ache. Found family, she thought one evening as they gathered around a fire, sharing stories and laughter. She'd never had this with the Red Moon Pack, had never felt truly accepted or valued. But here, with these ancient warriors who had seen empires rise and fall, she felt like she'd finally come home. Kieran became her constant companion. He was always there, watching her train, offering guidance, celebrating her victories, and providing steady support when the weight of her new reality threatened to overwhelm her. His scent of oak and storm became as familiar as her own, and she found herself seeking him out whenever she needed grounding. One night, she asked him about the prophecy. "It says I'm meant to heal the broken land. What does that mean?" Kieran stared into the fire for a long moment. "The wolf packs have been divided for centuries," he finally said. "Territories and hierarchies and endless skirmishes over borders and resources. The strong prey on the weak. Omegas are treated as disposable. Rogues are killed on sight rather than rehabilitated. The old ways, the ways of honor and unity, have been forgotten." "And I'm supposed to fix all of that?" Sarah's voice was skeptical. "Not alone." He looked at her, his amber eyes catching the firelight. "With your guard at your side, with any wolves who choose to follow you. The matriarch doesn't rule through force, Sarah. She leads by example. She shows wolves a better way and gives them the choice to follow. What if they don't want to follow? What if they choose the old ways? Then you'll deal with them as you see fit." His voice was hard now. "Make no mistake. You are a queen in truth. You have the power to enforce your will if needed. But the goal is to inspire loyalty, not demand it." As weeks turned into the cusp of a month, Sarah felt herself changing in ways that went beyond physical power. She stood taller. She spoke with confidence. The girl who had cowered at the edges of Red Moon Pack gatherings was gone, replaced by a woman who could stare down ancient warriors and make them smile with pride. But the Red Moon Pack was never far from her thoughts. Damon's rejection still ached like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Not because she wanted him, gods, that ship had sailed and sunk, but because of what it represented. The cruelty, the injustice, the casual way they'd thrown her away like garbage. "They'll need to answer for what they've done," she said one morning, her voice cold. Kieran, sparring with her in the training yard, paused. "Yes," he agreed. "They will. But you must be ready first. Revenge pursued too hastily becomes slaughter. Justice requires a clear head and a steady hand. "How will I know when I'm ready?" He smiled, sharp and fierce. "You'll know." The answer came sooner than expected. A scout, one of the guard's network of informants, arrived with news that made Sarah's blood run cold. A rogue wolf had stumbled into Red Moon territory and seen something impossible. Sarah Ashwood, alive and well, and training with warriors of legend. The rogue had been killed before he could flee, but not before word had spread. The Red Moon pack knew she lived, and they were coming. "How many?" Kieran demanded, his commander's tone sharp as broken glass. 25 wolves, the scout reported, led by Alpha Blackthorn himself and his son. They've declared her a threat to pack security. They're mobilizing a war party. Sarah felt the power rise in her chest, hot and eager. Her wolf snarled with anticipation. "Good," she said, her voice carrying an edge she'd never heard before. "Let them come. It's time they learned what they threw away." The Shadow Guard moved with military precision. Within hours, they had established a defensive position in a valley near the border of what Sarah had declared her territory. It was a natural amphitheater, ringed by cliffs that would funnel any attacking force into a kill zone. "Are you sure about this?" Mira asked, as they took their positions. "We could disappear. Make them think the rogue was mistaken." "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being weak. If they want to treat me as a threat, then I'll show them what a real threat looks like." The Red Moon wolves arrived at dawn. Sarah stood at the center of the valley in her human form, wrapped in a cloak of dark gray that made her silver hair seem to glow. Behind her, the 10 members of the Shadow Guard waited in wolf form, their massive shapes unmistakable even at a distance. Alpha Blackthorn led the war party, his wolf form large and dark and radiating authority. Damon was at his side, and Sarah felt a surge of vicious satisfaction when she saw him falter as he caught her scent. The broken bond must have given him a permanent sensitivity to her presence, his personal hell to bear. The Red Moon wolves fanned out, surrounding the valley's entrance. They were all in wolf form, ready for battle, but they hesitated when they saw the guards. Even at a distance, the size difference was obvious. The Shadow Guard made the Red Moon alphas look like puppies. Lyssa Thorne was there too, her cinnamon and iron scent cutting through the morning air. She stood near Damon, her posture possessive. Sarah's wolf rumbled with dark amusement. "Sarah Ashwood," Alpha Blackthorn's voice carried across the distance, amplified by will and power. "You were exiled from Red Moon territory. Your presence in these lands is a violation. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." Sarah threw back her head and laughed. The sound was cold and cutting, carrying her newfound power like a physical force. Around the valley, birds took flight in panic. "Mercy," she called back. "You cast me out to die in a winter storm. You stood by while your son rejected and humiliated me. And now you speak of mercy?" She let power creep into her voice. Let it roll across the wolves like thunder. "I think not, Alpha. You will be the one surrendering today. Or you'll learn what happens when you cast out the wrong wolf." "You're delusional," Lyssa's voice rang out. "You're still just an Omega playing at power. Alpha, let me handle her." Before Blackthorn could respond, Lyssa shifted to human form and charged. She was fast, enhanced by beta strength, her claws extended as she closed the distance. Sarah waited, perfectly still, until Lyssa was almost upon her. Then she moved. The transformation was instantaneous, one moment human, the next her massive silver wolf form. She didn't just block Lyssa's attack. She batted the smaller woman aside with one paw, like she weighed nothing. Lyssa flew 15 feet and hit the ground hard, the air exploding from her lungs. Sarah shifted back to human, her cloak settling around her shoulders as if the transformation hadn't happened. "Anyone else want to try?" Her voice was pleasant, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. The Red Moon wolves were backing away now, their ears flat, their tails beginning to lower. They could feel her power. They understood, in that primal way all wolves did, that they were in the presence of something far beyond their comprehension. "Shadow Guard," Sarah said quietly. "Show them." The 10 wolves behind her transformed, not into humans, but into their true forms. They were magnificent and terrible. Each one was easily twice the size of the largest Red Moon Alpha, their bodies packed with muscle that spoke of strength beyond measure. Their eyes glowed with ancient power, and their sense, normally controlled, rolled across the valley like a physical wall. These weren't normal wolves. These were the Unchained, the guardians of legend. And they had chosen Sarah. The Red Moon war party broke. Wolves scattered, their discipline shattering in the face of overwhelming power. But they couldn't flee. The Shadow Guard had surrounded them without anyone noticing, forming a perfect circle. There was no escape. Alpha Blackthorn stood his ground, but even he had lowered himself into a submissive crouch. Damon was on his belly, his eyes wide with terror, as he stared at Sarah's guards. "Please," Blackthorn said, his voice stripped of authority. "Mercy. We didn't know. We didn't understand. Silence." Sarah's single word cut through his pleading like a knife. She walked forward, her bare feet making no sound on the cold ground. "You knew I was your son's fated mate. You knew rejection would nearly kill me, and you did nothing. Worse, you exiled me to finish the job. We followed pack law. Your pack law is broken." Sarah's power surged, and every wolf in the valley, even the Shadow Guard, felt the weight of her will. "I am the Silver Matriarch. I am the one spoken of in prophecy, the one your ancestors bent knee to, and I declare your laws void." She stopped in front of Blackthorn, staring down at the Alpha who had once ruled her life. "Here is my judgment. You will return to your pack and tell them what happened here. You will tell them that there is a new power in these lands, and she remembers every slight, every cruelty, every act of injustice." Her eyes glowed silver, ancient power made manifest. "And you will tell them that any Omega who suffers under their law can come to me. Any wolf cast out for being weak or different or inconvenient, they belong to me now. This is my territory, and in it, strength is measured not by dominance, but by character." She turned to Damon, who was still on his belly, trembling. "And you rejected your fated mate to chase power. You chose politics over destiny. Your punishment is to live with that choice. Every time you look at her," she gestured to Lyssa, who was just staggering to her feet, "you'll remember what you threw away. Every time you feel the emptiness where our bond should be, you'll know it was your decision." Sarah turned away from him, dismissing him as thoroughly as he'd once dismissed her. "Lyssa Thorne, step forward." Lyssa approached on shaking legs, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "You attacked me without provocation," Sarah said coldly. "In my territory, that is a crime. Your punishment. You are stripped of your rank. You are no longer Beta. You are Omega." She let power flow through the words, making them binding, mystical. Around Lyssa's throat, a mark appeared. Not a mate bond, but a rank mark, burning with silver light as it reformed her standing in the hierarchy. "Perhaps in weakness, you'll learn empathy." The mark faded, and Lyssa collapsed, sobbing. Sarah looked at the assembled wolves. "Go. Return to your pack, and pray I don't decide to pay you a visit." The Red Moon wolves fled. Even Blackthorn, even Damon. They ran like rabbits before wolves, their pride completely broken. Only when they were out of sight did Sarah allow herself to sag slightly, the adrenaline of confrontation draining away. Kieran was at her side immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Well done," he said softly. "That was justice, not vengeance. You showed mercy where many would have shown only wrath." "I wanted to kill them," Sarah admitted. "My wolf wanted blood. But you didn't. That's what makes you a queen rather than a tyrant." He smiled. "Though I have to say, turning Lyssa into an Omega was brilliantly cruel." Despite everything, Sarah laughed. She wanted my life so badly. Now she can have a taste of it. In the days that followed, word spread across the territories. The Silver Matriarch had returned. An Omega cast out by the Red Moon Pack had transformed into a power beyond measure, and she was offering sanctuary to any wolf who felt broken by the old ways. They came in ones and twos at first. Omegas fleeing abuse, rogues seeking redemption, wolves who had been cast out for being different or weak or challenging authority. Sarah welcomed them all, and with the Shadow Guard at her back, she forged something new. Not a pack bound by dominance and fear, but a community bound by choice and respect. Her parents came eventually. They arrived at the border of her territory with heads lowered, their scents heavy with shame and fear. Sarah met them in human form, flanked by Kieran and Mira. "We heard what you've become," her father said. "We need you to know. We thought we were protecting you. The witch told us that binding your power was the only way to keep you safe." "You were afraid," Sarah said flatly. "Afraid of me. Afraid of what I represented." Her mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. "We're so sorry. If we could take it back. But you can't." Sarah's voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You stole 21 years from me. You let me believe I was worthless. You stood by while your pack threw me away." She paused, letting them feel the weight of her words. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But," she looked at Kieran, who nodded encouragingly, "you can earn the chance for forgiveness. There are wolves coming to my territory, who were treated as I was treated. Omegas, who were abused and broken. Help them. Use your knowledge of the old pack structures to help me build something better. And maybe, someday, we can have the relationship we should have had all along." Her parents collapsed in relief, swearing oaths of service. Sarah turned away, trusting the Shadow Guard to handle the details. She had bigger things to worry about. Because on the far horizon, storm clouds were gathering. Not weather. Something else. Something dark and ancient that her newly awakened senses could feel approaching. The prophecy had said she would come when hope was ashes, when the old ways failed. But it had also hinted at why that failure mattered. "The darkness is returning," Kieran said that night as they stood on the ramparts of her growing settlement. "My brothers and I can feel it. The same force that killed the last matriarch is stirring again." "Then we'll be ready," Sarah said, her voice steady. She looked at the wolves training in the yard below. Her wolves, her community. "I'm not the scared Omega they cast out anymore. I'm the Silver Matriarch. And this time, the darkness won't win." And so Sarah Ashwood's journey from broken Omega to legendary queen reached its first milestone. The girl who had been rejected and cast out had risen from death itself to claim her true power. She had faced those who wronged her with justice, tempered by mercy. She had built a haven for the broken and the lost. But her story was far from over. The prophecy spoke of healing broken lands, and there were many territories yet to transform. The ancient evil was waking, and the matriarch would need to be at full strength to face it. For now, though, she stood with her found family around her, with Kieran at her side, not as a fated mate, but as something perhaps better. A chosen partner who saw her as an equal and a queen. She had her shadow guard, her growing community, and power that made the very earth tremble. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer small. She was Sarah Ashwood, the Silver Matriarch, and her howl would wake the world. The blood moon was coming, the old texts whispered, and with it, a reckoning 3,000 years in the making. But that is a story for another chapter. What did you think of Sarah's transformation from rejected Omega to legendary queen? Did justice prevail in the end? What do you think will happen when the ancient darkness finally arrives? If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in the Silver Matriarch's journey. The battle against the coming darkness promises to be epic, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Silver Matriarch's tale. Until next time, may your own inner power never be bound, and may you always find the strength to rise when the world tries to push you down. We'll see